Due to a sharp rise in spending, Russia's federal budget deficit has surged 14-fold compared to January 2024, already exceeding the planned shortfall for the entire year, the Moscow Times reports.
In January, expenditures, according to preliminary estimates, were higher than revenues by 1,710 billion rubles, or 0.8% of GDP, compared with the budgeted deficit for the year of 1,170 billion rubles, or 0.5% of GDP. A year ago in January, the budget was implemented with a deficit of 124 billion rubles, writes the Moscow Times.
Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, its budget has consistently run at a deficit of over 3 trillion rubles annually, around 2% of GDP. To cover the gap, the Finance Ministry has relied on domestic borrowing and withdrawals from the National Wealth Fund, the liquid portion of which has already been reduced by 2/3.
Despite further increases in spending, the Finance Ministry aims to shrink the budget shortfall to 1,170 billion rubles, or 0.5% of GDP this year. However, these optimistic projections rely on expected revenue growth from tax hikes on businesses and citizens in 2025, as well as cuts to social spending in real terms, writes the Moscow Times.
Experts warn that Putin's determination to continue the war against Ukraine is draining Russia's finances. Official figures put inflation at nearly 10% as of February 2025, but economists estimate the real rate to be twice as high. Meanwhile, the Kremlin downplays the crisis, calling inflation, labor shortages, and rising prices temporary difficulties.
The Kremlin continues to conduct an information campaign likely directed toward both domestic and international audiences that aims to conceal the extent to which Russia's protracted war against Ukraine has negatively affected Russia's economy. Ms. Houston and Putin notably did not mention how the Russian central bank raised the interest rate to 21% in October 2024, or how Russia has been drawing from its National Welfare Fund to finance its war effort over the last 3 years. The liquidity portion of Russia's National Welfare Fund may run out by fall 2025, from a report by the U.S. Institute for the Study of War.
The war is draining more and more resources from Russia's civilian economy, leaving ordinary citizens to bear the cost. According to Federal State Statistics Service, prices have risen nearly 10% in the past year, with future increases expected. Major dairy producers have already warned retailers of upcoming price hikes of 7 to 10% in February.
Data from Romir suggest that real consumer price growth is between 20 to 30%. This is galloping inflation. The situation in Russia is clear. Inflation is out of control, creating major problems for the Finance Ministry. The central bank tried to portray the fight against it using market-based tools. The central bank still believes that there is a market economy in Russia. They raised the rate, which is a classic tool of market economy. But it doesn't work. No rate hike was implemented in December or February because it has no effect on inflation. Instead, they will resort to harsher measures, directly restricting loans to Russian businesses.
As a result, Russian businesses are already struggling with a severe working capital crunch. In the first 3 quarters of 2024, 16% of companies faced financial difficulties. By the end of the year, that number had risen to 25%, with no improvement in sight. Experts predict further inflation spikes and GDP growth slowing to just 1.5% in 2025. Earlier, CNN reported that Russia's worsening economic situation could force dictator Vladimir Putin to negotiate sooner than expected. Reported by Sergei Kudas, Yulia Granovska, UATV News. U.S. Representative Joe Wilson, a member of the Republican Party, has introduced a bill that would grant President Donald Trump the authority to supply weapons to Ukraine under a lend-lease program. The bill has already been registered in the U.S. Congress, but must go through several stages before becoming law. It must gain majority support in Congress, secure at least 60% of votes in the Senate, and only then can it be signed into law by President Donald Trump.
Grateful to introduce the Freedom First Lend-Lease Act as H.R. 1158. War criminal Putin understands only the language of force. We must give President Trump the authority to massively and quickly arm Ukraine with war-winning weapons to get Russia to the table. Peace through strength. Joe Wilson, United States Representative, on social network X.
The concept of peace through strength aligns with the stance of the new U.S. administration. According to Reuters, the United States is pushing its European allies to increase purchases of American-made weapons for transfer to Ukraine. This could strengthen Kyiv's position in potential negotiations with Moscow. Analysts point out that Donald Trump had already advocated for increasing arms purchases during his first term. However, at that time, European countries had not yet fully grasped the scale of the Russian threat.
Back then, Germany's main criticism wasn't about not wanting to pay, but rather that European countries were being pushed to buy American weapons at exorbitant prices. We know that American weaponry is not only among the best, but also among the most expensive. Countries like France and Germany wanted to boost their own defense industries instead.
European nations are playing an increasingly significant role in supporting Ukraine, both financially and militarily. That's why, for the first time, the 26th meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group in Ramstein format on February 12 is being chaired by the United Kingdom rather than the United States. The Pentagon has confirmed that U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth will present Washington at the meeting and will emphasize the need for stronger European leadership in security assistance to Ukraine.
Trump is serious about shifting more security responsibilities onto Europe, while the U.S. continues to support European integration and its aspirations to become an independent defense hub. The primary focus remains on NATO. European defense initiatives, on the other hand, have often been more symbolic than substantive.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has stressed the importance of maintaining the Ramstein format to ensure continued support from Ukraine's partners. He noted that the key outcome of the upcoming meeting will be the scale of military aid provided to Kyiv.
The main result of Ramstein is, of course, the collective assistance to Ukraine. It's about the number of aid packages our partners are providing, specific weapons, specific support.
Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, EU nations have recognized the extent of the threat posed by Moscow. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen recently stated that the stakes go beyond Ukraine's fate. Europe's future is also on the line. She emphasized that arms and ammunition deliveries to Ukraine will accelerate in the coming weeks. Since February 24, 2022, the European Union has provided Ukraine with a total of 134 billion euros in assistance. Reported by Sergei Kulias, Mykita Skoblikov, UATV News.